Hello, good evening, and welcome to the Sunday Night Breakdown, Sunday night edition. Daniel Ratledge and Dave Forrester with you to go through all of the action this week, although not as much as we were expecting to go through, Dave. Obviously, the whole referee thing rumbled on into this week, and we lost a couple of games along the way, both in Bristol. Two Bristol games didn't take place.
Yeah, been about certainly over the 5 years of doing this, I've been, and probably the 25 years before, I've been more depressed this week than I think I ever have.
Same. Absolutely the same.
Just as an enthusiast,
Yeah.
because and the reason that I'm trying to kind of rationalize why, and the reason ultimately is that it's also self-inflicted. There
Yeah.
is nobody else.
Yeah.
Ultimately, we've had problems with administrators. We've complained about national federation. We complain about all sorts of stuff. But ultimately, if you are seeking to be the guardian of the sport, and if you're seeking to run the pro league, then what happened this week just cannot be allowed to happen on
Mm.
any basis. And the fact that, as I say, it involves the league effectively shooting itself in both feet at the same time and coming pretty close to blowing its own brains out afterwards.
Mm.
Sorry for gory um, imagery. It was just utterly depressed. By Tuesday afternoon, I was kind of a plague on everybody. I don't care.
Yeah, yes.
I was as close, and that just
I
isn't.
must confess, Thursday I was driving down. I did a EuroLeague game Thursday. I was driving down, and I was thinking, I don't want to do Sunday night breakdown this week. I just don't really. I don't have the energy, and if there's no games at all, it's gonna just. It's just. I don't know. You know what I mean? It's just
Yeah,
one of those things where it's just so utterly depressing, and it's sort of. I was talking to my wife on Friday about it. Kind of remind me. I've told you before. I was chair of governors at the local infant school for 11 years, and I loved that job. It was an amazing job, and you got to do some great things. You know, you go to the leavers assembly, you'd go to the sports days, you'd go to the staff meals where they'd all make something and there'd be too much food and all of that. But alongside that, there was a load of crap that you had to deal with over the years.
yeah,
Obviously, I was there 11 years. Two head teachers retired, went through an Ofsted, academised, all sorts of various different financial issues because the funding formula always screwed us over and all of that sort of thing. But, you know, all the good stuff kind of outweighed the bad stuff
yeah, absolutely.
along the way. And I remember a few years ago, right before I left, I went to a meeting we were having. The trust had basically told us to reorganize, and it was affecting some staff. And sat in a room, 7 or 8 people with well over 100, probably over 150 years worth of service to the school. And actually, it was the youngest person in the room just went to me, "Why are you not fighting for us?" And I sort of reflected on it. I thought, "Why am I not?" Had no answer to it, and I walked out of that meeting, never went back again, never went back to
Yeah,
another meeting. The next day, I sent an email. It was a playoff final weekend. I remember that. And I wrote the email, and then on the Friday morning, I sent it when I reread it and thought, do I still mean it when I'm feeling a little more sane and having not really slept? And one of the things that the school had was they had this sort of well-being phrase of, you can't fill from an empty bucket. And
right.
basically that was their thing of if they look after each other, everybody keeps sure everybody's bucket is topped up. And you know, that's both in terms of looking after each other within the staff and looking after the children as well. And the interesting thing, when I read the email, I just said, "Look, I'm sorry, my Overdale bucket is empty." And I think it's one of those things. Is it's quite hard to know when the bucket is empty until it's empty. You can't quite see down to the bottom as to how much water is left in the bucket. But I was on Thursday thinking, what is the point of all of this? What am I doing all of this for? What is, you know, it's just so utterly depressing. And I guess, look, it's what are we on 23rd of March? So you'll know, Dave, because you've been there. This
Mm,
time of year, when you slap up and down the motorways, there's only so many lane closures on a Friday night or a Sunday night that you can cope with. And by the time you get to the end of March, everything is grind, everything is fatigue. So I've sort of frame it in that it is in that place. But it's that thing of you just look back over the last few years, Josh Wander, Aaron Raiden,
Yeah.
Chris Grant, this bullshit. It's just sort of like, oh, and it's like, wait, if my bucket is low,
What's everybody
what's everybody
everybody's
else? And
interested?
the thing
Yeah.
is, you and I, Dave, know hundreds and hundreds of people who used to be massively involved, whether they were fans, whether they were volunteers, whether they whatever, and they all at some point have drifted away for whatever reason, and it's stuff like this that just crushes people, right? They just sort of go, "What's the point?" And
Hmm.
again, if you and I are feeling like that, and we haven't spoke before turning on, so we've both independently felt the same way. And
Yeah.
I probably wouldn't have said that all out loud had you not started off, but there you go. But
No,
it's depressing.
but it's accurate though, isn't it? Because how can you be enthusiastic about something which seems so um, desperate to kill itself? And I get, and there is mitigation. There's a lot of stress at the moment. There's a lot of, as you say, it's the end of March. There's a bit of pressure. There's only 6 weeks of the season. Lots of games are being played. Loads of pressure in relation to what's going to happen next year. People's investments are on the line, in relation to the. And I get that there is pressure, and I get that there is upset, but I'm afraid to pick a fight for the reason we've gone on a reason like a beating drum. I've gone on about governance, and you've helped me over the past 3 or 4 years. Is because this is the result, Dan. This is what
Yeah.
happens. This is what happens when, unfortunately, you got a chairman who 6 weeks ago said, "I didn't look at the rules in the summer." Clearly, hadn't looked at them since to try and update anything. Said, we were just too busy doing other things." All right, but to run an organization, to run a professional sports organization, you have to use that phrase, be professional. That means you need communications people involved. That means you need to have a message. Yeah? You cannot be going off on a frolic of your own. You have to have guardrails. You have to have people, you have to have assistants. My wife used to work for Sunderland Football Club and Middlesbrough Football Club in the Premier League in the communications department.
Mhm.
And the third in line communications officer, whatever. Everything that goes out is monitored. Everything that goes out is mentioned, is carefully considered, has to go past people. And that's just to remind people what this is that and we talked about it a little bit last week, but on Sunday night, there were a stream of tweets which came out from the league chairman, the interim league chairman, to my mind, and people can go back and they were deleted on Monday, but they're still out there on the internet if people want to find them, which to my mind were accusing of bias and then subsequently attributed that bias to race. Okay. And sadly, there was no evidence put forward to support that type of proposition. None. Right? There was some stats put up which it turns out that the referee in question had only refereed 3 Sheffield games this season and they'd won one of them.
Mhm.
One referee out of 3. Well, so what? There was also reference within those messages to outlandish calls, which quite ironically we'd actually done
Mhm.
the podcast that
Yeah.
morning. So we'd actually talked about the game. And I don't think either of us came to the view that there were any outlandish calls in that game
No.
independently without knowing what was coming forward.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we weren't trying to damp it down. We were just giving an honest, independent opinion on what we saw of one game out of 360 that we're going to talk about this season,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
without any idea of anything like that. So outlandish calls designed to elicit a reaction. And then what happened was, because there's some documents come through over the week which have helped us. On Monday night, to be honest, the most impressive document of the whole thing has been the letter that the Referees Association put together, which Sam's got on Hoops Fix, which basically says this isn't acceptable to come from the league chairman. And then there are messages. Then there are messages from Atiba Lions, who doesn't call doesn't directly accuse the referee of bias, but the referee is Ed Udansky, if anybody doesn't know. I'm not trying to hide that or anything, but does indicate that that people need to be educated in relation to what he calls unconscious bias, which is something that we know does exist, but implies very much that again that effectively Sheffield haven't been getting a fair shake from the single referee again, sadly, without any evidence being put forward. Um, and at that point, my view, and I think your view, was that we're going to have a problem, and the problem is only going to be solved initially if the league chairman steps down, because by this point he deleted his tweets, but one assumed, but as I say, Sheffield hadn't rode back on the basic allegation, which was that they'd been treated unfairly, and had indicated that they'd previously gone through various processes. Yeah. The problem is we've not had any evidence over the week of any of the previous correspondence that's been sent to complain about this referee before. And the absence of evidence is often damning, I'm afraid. If it's not there, you have to think we'd have seen it by now. The reason, of course, for all of this, most likely, is because of the ongoing schism with the BBF and the absolute frying of everybody's brains in relation to Chris Grant's madness, right? And as I say, Vaughan Millett will have put in millions. He's effectively the owner of Sheffield, so I assume that didn't come cheap. He's funded the team this year. He's brought in investors for other clubs. He's put a lot of time, effort, work into trying to do this. And that now he's being told effectively due to the vicissitudes of the sport in this country, that might all be for nothing. So there's a lot of pressure on him as well. But I think what you thought and what I thought, I'm supposing what you thought, is that he'd have resigned as league chairman. He can, and then the move towards rapprochement will go on. And by Wednesday afternoon, there's a game at Bristol. Wednesday evening, he hasn't resigned, and the referees have given a statement saying, "Well, look, we cannot tolerate one of ours being accused, in our view, unfairly and without foundation, which is probably more substantial, more significant, and therefore we're not going to ref." Now, when you're
And
professional,
there's obviously the complexity of the fact that FIBA referees have to ref.
yeah,
They're not allowed sort of boycott. Um, so therefore the game was sort of is it, isn't it? Because it wasn't quite, because nobody knows who's appointed in advance. If there were three FIBA referees appointed in advance, then in theory the game uh, would have gone ahead. If there's not, then does anybody else want to cover it? And if you're a FIBA referee not appointed to that game and you get asked to cover it, why would you want to do it?
well,
If
nearly
you're a,
every
and again, if you're a referee, what's to stop you being ill on the day?
well, in any event, I mean, there is every single referee in our league, I think, bar one maybe, has a job.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
They're working. They can't just drop everything and get to Bristol for 7:30 if they're not
yeah,
being
yeah,
ruled to get to Bristol for
yeah,
7,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? So I mean, so at this point, the thing that really staggered me most was that he was still the chairman of the league.
Mm.
That to me was just, just dumbfounding. You can't.
I thought what came out on Friday was pretty good. I just thought it should have come out on Monday or Tuesday.
Well, that's effectively where we got to. On Friday, we got. I differ with you a little bit about that, about what came out on Friday. I think it was the necessary compromise.
Mm.
I think it had to be, it was the only thing that could come out, given the position that um, Millet and to a lesser degree Sheffield had kind of backed themselves into. Um, but what I wasn't impressed with was what I regard as a non-apology apology. Um, I don't, Vaughan Millet apologised for inferring unconscious bias. That was his phrase, right? That was what was produced. Now, he didn't infer unconscious bias in his tweets.
Mm. Yeah.
Now, that was not what he inferred. Now, that's what they've rode it back to. But the initial suggestion, and there was an old Mike Tuck tweet which was produced as well about this referee screwing some Surrey before that, Sheffield before that, right? But what that's been rolled back to is, Vaughan Millett apologising for something he didn't say. That's what Atiba Lyons said.
Mm.
That's fine. I'm not going to tell Atiba Lyons he's not right or wrong about that, because I've not walked a mile in his shoes. I'm certainly not a black man living in Sheffield,
Mm.
in a high pressure job, dealing with white people all the time. All the things that Atiba has been through in his life. I am not somebody who's going to turn around and tell him that this type of thing doesn't exist or that he is wrong. But I'm also not going to I'm also going to use the same principle to define what Millet said about Widanski,
mm,
which he's never walked in his shoes. And without producing some evidence, it does not get worse than calling than the saying that a referee should not be refereeing in our league because he is racially biased. And you can, whatever the apology says, if you go back, if I'm a referee, I'm not happy with the fact that he did not make a fulsome apology and the fact that it came on Friday, right? Because I don't know how genuine that apology is. Now, the whole sad and sorry twist about this, right, is that it appears to have been some form of, and this is my supposition, so I might be wrong, but it's notable that in both the initial tweets and in the subsequent story in the Yorkshire Post, which gives a kind of Sheffield slant on things. The suggestion is that this all needs to be directed to the BBF, right, the British Basketball Federation. And the suggestion is that, I think in his initial tweet, it was something on the lines of, we don't appoint the referees. Now, I mean, there's one, you shouldn't be appointing the referees. You're the league chairman and you're partial because you're part of the club. So clubs should have nothing to do with appointing referees. But the inference was that the BBF were failing in monitoring and dealing with their previous complaints of either bias or racism or whatever they previously complained about. Nobody knows because there's no correspondence being put forward. That was the inference. And the reality is, and that puts a bit more pressure on the BBF. That deals with the whole issue that's currently driving a chasm through the sport. It's their side of ramping it up a bit. It's political, as you would call it, political bullshit, right? That's what it ultimately is. Except, of course, it's not the BBF's job. The SLB are responsible for the SLB employ the previous referees coordinator, and Richard Stokes, EuroLeague ref, been around for years and years and years. He resigned on Tuesday morning because of this, right? Because that's where the complaint should have gone, not to the BBF. So it appears that by trying to ratchet up the pressure on the BBF and stand behind his coach, who has a feeling of a legitimate grievance, what he's actually done is put the whole league into absolute turmoil, has demonstrated to anybody who wants to use this stick to beat them with that there is a stick to beat them with, that they're not capable of running something as complicated as this. And by failing to correct and, in my view, issue a proper apology, dealing with the words that he actually wrote until Friday afternoon, has elongated this issue far beyond where it should have been, and we still haven't, Sheffield still haven't played since, either men or women.
mm,
So what that tells you behind the scenes, I'm not party to stuff. I'm not, no agenda, I'm not party to stuff. I spoke briefly with Paul Blake and John Paul Heron at the Eagles game on Tuesday night before the game, because John Paul was in the crowd, right? So I have a little bit of, but I'm not party to anything else. So reading from everything that is out there, it's just been desperate. And ultimately, sports are passionate, and and sport is about advancing causes, and sport is about competing and get, in competition, people are going to go up against each other and people are going to be passionate about it and people are going to want to win. Get all of that. But you have to have separation between governance and emotion. And you also, to be in the bluntest term, you have to have referees.
yeah.
And I'm afraid, you can call a referee just about anything under the sun, but you don't call them a cheat, right? And not unless you absolutely have the receipts. And there's nothing come forward, no evidence come forward. Some long-held grievance may or may not be there, but nothing has come forward to substantiate what happened. And not realizing that in using those words, not realizing what you would do, not having a league office to run it past, feeling that you are somebody who is capable of, who is, entitled to express those views, is bewildering to me. It's an absolute failure of governance that it was ever allowed to happen. So yeah, so we're still not finished. I mean, I think Newcastle plays Sheffield on Friday in Sheffield. You know, all the games have gone on this week now. Ed was refereeing a game today, so one assumes that the only stumbling block now is is Sheffield.
Mm,
Because if Edudansky's refereeing, no one's going to be going on strike in favour of Edudansky. So the only issue is the two games that were cancelled on Friday, on Wednesday, which one involved Bristol because it was too early, Bristol Caledonia, and the second involved Sheffield, and then the Hatters game yesterday, which was also cancelled.
mm.
So just a horrendous mess. Yeah, that's my assessment of it all, Dan.
Yeah.
Without, as I say, without fear, favour, or any particular agenda, no agenda. Just my assessment is, man, what a damn silly thing to do.
Mm,
And if you do feel that way, there are so many different ways to communicate it. And also, the third one is X is the devil. Get off it, people. Come and join me.
mm.
Sorry, I've talked a
Ah,
lot there.
yeah, no,
I don't know
no,
if you've
no,
got anything. I didn't
no,
mean
no.
to shut you down, but
No, it's as I say, it's just that whole thing of just feeling just mm, the the bucket is nearly empty. Put it that way. Can we get to the? We've
yeah,
done
we
all.
can. Just on that, I don't think, just so people understand though, I mean, you've been around 30 years, 35 years. I've been around 30, 35 years. I don't ever remember a direct challenge to the integrity of a ref, do you?
Oh, not on this scale. I
On
mean, there
this
might have
scale.
been something where one person has said one thing, but
Oh yeah, people get bad calls and we shout
yeah,
at them and we
yeah,
complain
yeah,
about them and
yeah,
we whinge about them and I'm about to slate a few of them in a minute.
yeah, 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 yeah.
All that stuff. But this isn't something which if you remember Arteta in Newcastle a while ago when Newcastle had that goal where they had three VARs,
Yeah, yeah.
Arteta said something afterwards that
A
this was
disgrace.
disgrace
Yeah,
or
yeah,
something like
yeah,
that. And he eventually had four Qs or four KCs, a massive tribunal, and they all
yeah,
decided that it had a different meaning in Spanish as it did in English or something
yeah,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah.
Right. But that wasn't even close
Mm,
to what we've been inferred of. Yeah, this type of stuff doesn't happen in sport.
mm,
It doesn't happen in sport, not in this country. So it is unique, and that's why we're talking about it a lot. And Vaughan Millett he may be responsible for us having a league this year. There may be a lot of good things that he has accomplished, but he's been here a year,
mm,
and he has to know better. People around him have to know better. That type of stuff, it just cannot. Um, Even if it just cannot come out that way. It shouldn't come out at all. From my perspective, his complaints are meritless. Um, as I say, I'm not going to judge what Atiba says because I can't. But it just can't.
mm.
Yeah, let's talk about the games.
Let's move on to the leavers assemblies and the lunchtime
Yeah,
the
all the fun
lunchtime
stuff.
things, all the
Yeah.
good things that we enjoy. Although I have to say there was a bit of meh in some of the games this week as
Well,
well.
to be fair, I mean, the only thing that kept us going in the week was us beating Bakken, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. Oh yeah, let's talk about that. Newcastle through to the final four on Tuesday, but beating them handily as well. Trafford
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah, I mean, back when we were missing a guy called Palakovic who had 28 and 11 in the first leg, and they were
Mm,
pretty small, in relation to their four-man was playing the five and that type of stuff. Um, but it was, and I think one thing we've learned about the European basketball through the EMBL is that our teams are quite good.
mm,
Because Newcastle aren't the best team in our league,
no.
currently under 500. Um, and I think we punch above our weight financially. Um, and the I was yeah, Newcastle played great. They competed back and couldn't make a shot, which helped. I mean, I think Newcastle then defended Leicester on Friday night like they were back in, which didn't
Mm,
help.
mm,
But you could see, I mean, there was an absolute focus to them, chance to get to a final four against, at the end of the day, proper teams with decent budgets. And
mm,
to be fair, the Eagles, they're now 9-2 in that league, or 8-2 in that league this year. Bristol won the last four games in that league as well on the other
mm,
side.
mm.
three of the teams that have qualified came from Newcastle's group, and indeed the Polish team that they played in the semi-finals that they've already beaten in Warsaw,
Mm.
knocked out a German BBL team, only
Yeah,
just.
yeah, yeah.
Only just with a shot with 1 second to go, and lost to lose by 20 instead of 22 in the second leg. So we're talking about going further in the competition than the German Bundesliga team.
Mm,
This is giving us credibility in and around the leagues that we're competing with. It's not giving us credibility around the ACB. We're not FIBA Euro Cup teams or anything like that,
mm,
or Champions League teams or whatever. But in relation to Bakken, Bratislava, Bamberg, these Voluntari, these type of teams. As I say, I think Leicester would have done that to Bakken. I think London would have done that to Bakken.
mm,
Um, Sheffield would have if anybody would have reffed them. Um, I just I think it really I'm not dissing Newcastle. I mean, Darius was great in this game. Darius had the first 6 points of the game. He defended. You could see how much he wanted it. He even got a cuddle off him at the end. So I'm biased, but
mm,
because for they've he comes up, and the rest of the guys, and Okoro was back, and Okoro just gives them a whole different level of vibe, if I can put it that way. But we need to celebrate that because it's a long time since a British team, even though it's EMBL, and I get it's EMBL, it's a long time since any British team has been playing a European game in April.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I don't think
So
London
the,
did.
the only other team that made it to the final four of a European competition was Birmingham, actually,
Yeah,
in what
and
was the NEBL Challenge. It wasn't
right,
the
okay.
main NEBL. It was like their second tier thing, and they got
Season
to
when
the.
Rob played 600 games.
No, I think Rob. I don't think Rob was on that team. Yorick was
Um,
on that team because Yorick, I'm pretty sure, was the MVP of the final four. But Birmingham lost by one in overtime. I think it was in the semi-final.
that has entirely escaped my British basketball consciousness. So I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I think it was 2002, three, something like that. That's my vague recollection of it.
The other thing about this game was it was like Alan Aikens kind of woke up and kind of removed his hibernation from December.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost like flick the switch and suddenly I'm not, I'm the rabbit
Maybe
who's.
it's that thing. What was that? Who was the guy at? There was somebody at Glasgow who I said was a daylight savings time player because he
Yeah.
played really well until the clocks went forward and then did nothing over the winter and then came back to life in late March. I forget who it was now.
Yeah. So yeah, but no, it was there's about they did all right. I mean, there's about probably 1,200 people there, maybe 1,000, 1,200 people on a Tuesday night. And there was a real sense of accomplishment at the end of it. So whatever happens to them in the final four, it's a way. It is that competition is a way forward for teams. I'm not sure that either Newcastle or Bristol are the best placed teams to be in it, to be honest, because of the level of strain it puts on their resources.
Mm,
It's it would be more suited to the type of resources that Sheffield or Manchester or London have, because
mm,
I think they'd have every chance of winning it. But Newcastle and Bristol have dipped their toe in the water with it for the last two
mm,
years, and I've thoroughly enjoyed it. Enjoyed the games, enjoyed the difference in the way games were played, and I'm happy that they've got something tangible to show for it.
mm. Let's move on to a game that you were probably less, you enjoyed less, Dave. Leicester Riders 99, Newcastle Eagles 81. Knight was out for uh, Newcastle. You touched on it already. Leicester shooting. Abercrombie, three threes in a row. Hunter, another one. 3 minutes into the game, Leicester led 16-4.
What do you know why Knight was out? I don't know.
No, I didn't. No,
Anybody?
no, I didn't hear
I
that.
don't know if he's not well or something. You didn't appear to be on the bench though.
Mm,
Um, well, this is when people talk about coaches and players, right? This is an absolute, nailed on example because I listened to your interview with Mark before the game, and what was the one stat he produced? He produced the stat about Leicester making the most 3-point baskets from assisted
yeah, from us.
3-point
Yeah,
baskets, right? Now, if he's telling you that,
yeah,
I can't tell you how much he's told his players that,
yeah, yeah.
right? More than once, right? Because you don't get, and I'm afraid it was kind of, even though Newcastle lost four league games, it was kind of a schedule game because Leicester coming off two really tough losses.
Mm.
Abercrombie pissed off at the game after the game at Sheffield because he
Mm,
didn't get a couple of calls. You know, they would, to use the vernacular, they would have been ticking,
mm,
right? And they're coming back home
mm,
and they've got a week of practice to play in their own gym and all that. And they're coming up against a team who I think the last time they saw them on that floor celebrating, knocked them out the the
mm,
semi-finals.
mm,
Don't think they've played there since. So there's a ton of motivation for Leicester and there's a ton of rhythm for Leicester. Against that, Newcastle have a need to win because they lost four in a row, quote marks in the league, but they're also coming off what was quite an emotional high of Tuesday night.
mm.
You know, and it's not physically, these guys can play as much as they want, possibly outside of in this game of Karu, who I thought got tired in the second half, didn't look like
Yeah,
he
yeah.
had a
He didn't look like he was moving right all game,
no,
if I'm
to be
honest.
fair, he does. He's been like that a bit all season. Yeah, I always think he's injured. I'm always scared he's injured.
Mm,
So he does kind of drag his leg a little bit. But in the second half, I thought he wore down, and probably because of the quick turnaround for his injury, and the lack of a little bit lack of conditioning from being out for a couple of weeks. But apart from everybody else, they can play. So it's all about mentality. Now Leicester move the ball better than anybody. They hunt open threes. Abercrombie in particular hunts open threes. Hunt that hunts open threes. Johnson, right when he comes in, they're all looking for those shots. So to give up, and so they basically, I think they scored the first five, six times down, and they were on threes. You know,
yeah,
Abercrombie,
yeah.
as you say, pop, 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 and given that Newcastle have played Leicester four times already this season, um, you know, to give up that degree of open shots at that point is indefensible, really.
Mm,
It's only defendable because of the circumstances as I just explained
yeah,
around the game.
yeah, yeah.
You can't win, and you can't beat Leicester if they're making 17 threes in a game. There's just no chance. Because the crazy thing is Newcastle have been able to score on Leicester, not easily, but probably as comfortably as just about anybody this year in the games that they've played. The games have been up in the 80s and the 90s, you know.
Mm,
But you have to get stops,
mm.
you know, and they couldn't. So I thought Leicester came out really ready to go. The other thing was there was a delay, wasn't there? Was it refs in the building?
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So you had to get refs in the building. That I always when you had those games, I always felt the delay hurt the away team. Often the delay was because the away team was getting there late, so that would be
Mm,
different. But hurts your away team because your routine is really thrown off in relation to your nutrition, everything like that. You might, just particularly if you've driven down on the day, you're all built up for that. You know, you probably run if you're Andy Thompson, you probably run out of sugar sweeties or something, you know, something like that. Whereas there's a little bit more home comfort for the home team. So I don't think that probably helped Newcastle either. But then again, you know, Leicester have got possibly the best start on five in the league, and Newcastle haven't started a game well apart from the European games for a long time. So
mm,
that's probably me making an excuse for them.
mm.
But I just, you know, I love the way Leicester move the ball in this, and it always looks better when shots are dropping.
Yeah.
You
So,
know,
so,
go
so
on.
Johnson and Wright came in and hit threes as well. Leicester was 6 of 7 from behind the arc in the third quarter, in the first quarter. They led 30-17 after 8 minutes. But
They were all
Okoro with
catch and shoot looks, weren't they?
yeah, yeah,
They were all good catch and shoot looks. It's not a fluke. They didn't just get lucky. They
yeah.
generated the shots. Newcastle were a step off, and bang, they made them.
Okoro with 18 points in the first half sort of kept Newcastle in the game at that point.
Well, it's the history of Newcastle all season has been kind of guys scoring bunches. And in this game, it was a Coro, and then it was the beginning of the second half. It was Alan Aikins, and then it was nobody.
Mm,
The nobody was the problem.
yeah,
You know, they needed the third guy to be either Knight or James, and James didn't make a shot all night, and so you know ultimately they struggled. But when they got their toes in the game for a short period of time, it was a game, particularly when Duke was duking.
Let
To
me
use,
let me just get through to that then. So
yeah,
so it was 56-43 at halftime. Leicester were at that point 19 of 30, 15 assists, 9 of 13 from three. Newcastle got it down to 5 and actually had a couple of decent looks to make it closer. And then Shelton, who was fair to say overhyped all game, fouled out on a second technical. And again at that point they had a chance. Uh, Fouled out, disqualified. Sorry, on a
yeah.
second technical, and obviously didn't get the memo from everybody else that week. And and
I mean, you know,
somebody should have stopped him walking back, I think. But
well,
Newcastle had a chance to cut it to to one shot, missed the free throw, and then
Yeah, it actually
turned it
probably
over on the
it probably
inbound.
it probably actually helped Leicester because it got
Mm.
Thompson back in the game.
Yeah, yeah.
And then that mean that's when they made that run because Newcastle
Mm.
were down on players at the end of the third quarter. Kande was in the game, and that's not a place he's been in the third quarter. Shelton, I mean, he came in the game obviously, and he was guarding Alan Aikens, and he got into it with Alan Aikens because Alan Aikens was scoring the ball, so he wants to come in and do his job for the team and disrupt Alan Aikens, and they get a double technical, fine.
Mm.
But the rest were kind of losing it in the third quarter in this game. I didn't think it was probably the most control, but at least they were there.
Mm.
Then he misses he loses the ball on the drive. He may have been fouled. You couldn't see it on the telly, and he does kind of a double gesticulation on the way
Yeah,
back.
yeah,
Wasn't it the
yeah.
first one? And I mean, it's just and I'm thinking, what are you doing?
Mm.
And eventually the tee comes. Then David Griffin gives him a second tee, which appears
Mm.
subsequently to be rescinded. And I haven't
Yes.
quite. You can tell me why that
I
happened.
was told after the game. So what happens is once you've got the second tee, you can't get another one.
But he was on the bench, wasn't he?
No, because you're disqualified. You're not on the bench. There's no way of getting another one apparently.
All right. Well, so
So that's
it's a
why
change
that's
since the Gauze situation.
yeah, yeah. No, I think it is one of those things where you used to because you could just keep racking them up as they were going
Well,
out. But
yeah. I mean, we had a
now
game.
once you're disqualified, you're out of the game. You can't get any more.
We had a game with Paul Gauze in 2000 at Sports Central 2011, and Neil Wilkinson gave him, I think, three technicals on his way back from the far baseline to the
Mm.
bench.
Yeah, yeah.
And the first one was he was thrown out, and the next two were on the bench.
Mm.
Um, and if he'd been if there'd been a third one on the bench, then Fab was gone as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Fab was playing in the game,
Yeah, yeah.
So it's like at that point it was like bench pressing. Eric, our ex-sailor team manager, chief henchman, basically frog marched him back to the locker room.
Yeah.
But and Worcester shot about because it was two foul shots a time at the time. They shot about 10 free throws. It was
Yeah,
like
yeah.
that
Yeah.
guy Kozlowskis with the ridiculous shots.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And amazingly we came back and won that game. So that's changed now. So basically, what it means is that Duke's looking at a bit of a suspension because what he was saying on the bench afterwards may not have been worth a tee,
Mm.
but it was inappropriate language, and it appeared, I don't know if it was directed at a referee or a player, but we could see what he was saying. And the first word began with F and the second with Y.
Mm.
And he's already got 9 points.
Mm.
So you're probably thinking he's due a couple of games now. I mean, to be fair, he's been living a charmed life, hasn't he?
Mm.
He's the
Mm.
only player to have hit anybody this season. He's hit him twice.
Mm.
He's done it twice. It's just daft.
Mm.
I guess I get that it's his old team. I get that he's coming to do a job, but somewhere along the line, you've got to be able to, everything I've ever heard about the guy is that he's a great teammate,
Mm.
right? But somewhere along the line, you've got to be able to look at your teammate in the eye and know that you're going to be there for us,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
when it matters. And he is an important cog in what they do. And he came out, he played well tonight in Bristol. He seems to have the goldfish time of memory, whereby
Yeah,
nothing
yeah.
happens to him. He just
Yeah,
comes out
yeah.
and does the same thing, which, as a player, as a coach, you love that because there's no preconceived nonsense. But he just can't keep, that's not the way ultimately you win things.
Mm.
Not the way Leicester have won things over the years. You don't have that. You can't be that loose at cannon. And obviously they got to the end of the year. It'll be interesting to see because he's British qualified, so it'll be interesting to see whether Leicester tolerate it and keep him. If it really will be.
Yeah.
He does bring stuff.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
does. He's played some really good games this year as well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Leicester, the last 9 points of the third quarter, and then 9 in a row when Washington and Jackson twice hit threes, pushed it out to a 21. This was your and it was no one for Newcastle moment.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Okoro was, I think, running on a bit empty, and probably Leicester were really locked in on him. There's another big play in the game, which Pulliam again. I'm talking about discipline winning games.
Mm.
Pulliam got a fourth foul. That was a
Mm.
critical play
Yeah, yeah,
in the
yeah.
third quarter. He got
Yeah.
fourth foul on a technical, right? And Hunter riled him, and Hunter's had technicals this year when he's been riled. And Hunter riled him, and there was a bit of going back and forth. But Pulliam's comment towards Hunter was made with kind of a gesticulation forward. He moved his head
Mm.
forward as he said it,
Mm.
which grabs the referee. He grabs the referee's attention because he's closing the space. And
Mm.
at this point, the game's already close to kicking off.
Yeah.
So Pulliam's going to get that. He cannot get that. He's meant to be the smart guy. He's meant to be the point guard. He's on three fouls. They're down a body. Because of that, Kante had to come in and play in the last 4 minutes of the third quarter.
Mm.
And that's when the run happens. Not necessarily because of him, but Kante is not going to be the guy. So that's one less option. And I thought Hunter was a little bit lucky because Hunter gave him a little pat on the back as he went past.
I think as he walked across half court, he must have been very close to the line. Put it that
Yeah,
way.
I think once someone gets a technical and you walk past them and you pat them on the back, that's pretty much a way of
Mm.
potentially bringing things forward. But hey, that's the game.
Mm.
It's meant to be feisty. As I say, and I think as I say at this point, I think the rest was struggling. There's one call I think which you got on the baseline where the ball clearly hit. I think Okoro when he was stood out of bounds on his knee.
Yeah, yeah.
Before it bounced and Newcastle got the ball, and I'm looking thinking.
Mm.
What is going on here? Anyway, but yeah, the game kind of petered out a little bit, and it was a more important win for Leicester than it was for Newcastle ultimately in relation to Leicester have the chance to win the league, and Newcastle don't.
I don't think they do have a chance to win the league, but
Well, they did. No, they did. I think they did on Friday night. After Friday night,
yeah,
you're two losses back, and you've got to play 4 games against the two teams that are ahead of you.
yeah,
Or
yeah,
3 games against the teams that are ahead of you. You have a chance. It may not be much of a chance.
yeah, yeah,
But it's a punch list. You have a chance to win games and win the league. If Leicester won every game before the end of the season, after Friday night, if Leicester won every game, they would win the league.
I don't know
I
about
think
that
they would
because
be because they'd beat London 3-1. They'd lose 3-1 to Sheffield,
yeah,
right? And then it'd be points difference. So close,
yeah,
close, whatever.
always close.
On a
Yeah,
three-way tie, whatever.
yeah,
But basically they had a shot. So yeah, but I agree with you. I don't think it's going to happen.
yeah,
But I don't think they didn't. Your charts would have said it was a non-zero chance.
yeah, yeah, yeah. True, true. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And shout out replay for the Jackson tipping the ball in on a 3-point shot.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yes, that one as well. Yeah, yeah, that seemed to get Stu a little bit energized.
yeah.
Uh,
Abercrombie 5 of 10 for three for 18 points. Jackson and Thompson both had 16. Johnson and Wright both had 15. Leicester was 17 of 30 from three. Okoro 19. Island Aiken 17. Pulliam 14. Newcastle was 7 of 26 for three.
Likens is 17 were in the first half, the second half, and the Corals 18 of his 19 were in the first half.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the way they are. That's the way they're built. They
Mm.
have guys who just kind of go to work, as it were. It's an unusual team to watch.
Let's go to yesterday. Cheshire 89. Caledonia 75. No idle rock for Cheshire. Knicks aggressive defensively early on. Timberlake with 7 points. They scored the first 13 points of the game to lead 13-0 inside 3 minutes.
It's amazing because if they hadn't scored the first 13 points, every single view that you and I had about the game would have been different.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I mean, it really does impact. You look at
Yeah.
the 41-28. What are they doing right? What are they doing wrong? Well, they're
Mm.
playing each other straight down the line, apart from the first 3 minutes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The funny thing is, I've got nothing else. That was basically the game.
Yeah, it was.
Caledonia sort of hung around to make you feel like
Here's the question.
they might get back into it, but
I mean,
Timberlake
here's the
was
thing.
scoring.
I mean, the first 4 minutes. I've talked before about scripting a game, right? The first 4 minutes of this game was scripted in the most perfect way.
Mm.
Cheshire, right? First possession of the game, Holden gets a post up on Malcolm, I think, and gets his little hook shot. Yeah. Then they force Fagbenley into a turnaround 15-footer. He's shooting about 25%, right? Then they come down. I think Timberlake got a pull up off the dribble. Maybe I lose to Cheshire offenses, but they had 3 or 4 perfect offenses where they
Yeah.
got the ball exactly where they wanted. Next time down, Fagbenley chucks up a 3 at the end of the shot clock.
Yeah.
Next time down, Cheshire score. Next time down, Caledonia turn the ball over. It's 7-0, but it's a
Yeah.
manner of the 7-0.
Yeah.
Nobody apart. I'm surprised that, given the urgency of the situation, Glasgow, Caledonia are still going with both Malcolm and Fagbenley in the starting lineup at the wings. I think that puts an unbelievable amount of pressure on Ramsey, and these guys in Cheshire defended Ramsey really well. And if people want to go back and watch the first 3 or 4 minutes, they denied Ramsey the ball.
Mm.
They didn't even let him touch the basketball. So that's a plan. That's what we're going to do. right? So this doesn't all come out of just fluke. And then the question is, well, who's going to generate offense for us? Well, you're going to load onto Patrick Whelan,
Mm,
because and Patrick Whelan is a scoring guard, so you need somebody to set him up primarily. And then the question is, and so what happens? It ends up with, as I say, if I Bender getting two shots, and because he was left with them, and a turnover,
mm,
and then Johnny called a timeout. And I've talked about this before. I don't like calling a timeout and sending the same guys back out there in that situation. I think if you're going to call a timeout, then it's time for somebody else.
mm,
Do you know what I mean? And I know why coaches do it because you don't want to lose guys 2.5 minutes into a game.
mm.
Yeah, but it doesn't necessarily. But you have to hope that your players are mature enough and understanding to know just because I'm being taken out, it doesn't necessarily mean I've made all the mistakes.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
You know what I mean? And he didn't. And when they came back in, they still couldn't get a good look. And they were, what, 16-3, 13-0, 16-3.
Mm,
And that was the game. And then they had the more offensively minded guys come in on the wing, which is Spielman and Ventura, albeit Ventura couldn't make a shot. And Onwas. And Onwas is, for me, I think Onwas would be starting.
mm,
I understand where you bring Spielman Ventura, but Omos has been there 3 years. He's better than just playing, 10 minutes, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there. He's a guy who can get a bucket when he needs it, play defense from the start, sets the tone. I'll be amazed if he's not starting some of the rest of the games going forward.
mm,
And yeah, you're right, because the first 5 minutes of that game is the game.
mm,
I mean, they never got to handle Timberlake at all. And we know Timberlake on his mood is, he's a slightly less high maintenance version of Teddy Allen. He
mm.
can just go off. He can score.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You know, I say slightly less. I'm not saying, but I mean
Mm,
that. And you have to be aware of that. You don't have two 37-point games in this league if you
mm,
can't, put the ball in the basket. Um, and particularly around all the other guys that they have. But the other thing Caledonia have a problem with, unfortunately, and I looked at halfway through the third quarter at the guys that they had on the bench, they can't really go small.
mm,
Johnny, I mean, his backup point guard is Patrick Whelan.
mm.
But
Yeah.
he's starting at the two, and he has to play, and he's having to play at the point when Ramsey goes out.
Mm,
Ventura they signed, but he's not comfortable handling the basketball of the court in SLB. That's not what he is,
no, no. Not
And
particularly not against Cheshire.
not against Cheshire, exactly. And that means that I looked on the bench, and who they had? They had Hughes, Barnes, Malcolm, Fagbenley, and I think at the end we took out the last big guy, might have been Spielman on the bench.
Mm,
I think five guys who are 6'7", but no guards to spell Whelan. And Whelan as you pointed out in the game, he's missing shots because he's tired because he's been, because he's number one on everybody's scouting report, or he should be.
mm,
And then on top of that, he's having to handle the basketball as well at times as well. He's having to do a lot of things. So it's kind of tough with the roster that they've got, but I think you have to be able to score the ball early on in games. It's and I don't know if that lineup with Ramsey, Whelan, Fagbenley, Barnes, and Morris and Malcolm is going to do enough of that. So that's why Cheshire did everything they were meant to do
yeah,
in
yeah.
the game.
I've written down Cheshire were doing all the Cheshire things they need to do to win the game.
They did. Now, the one thing you'd say though is that their defense Skylar was really good defensively,
Mm,
really good, and they bent because all that Cheshire had to do was to keep Caledonia off the glass, right? If they could keep Caledonia off the glass, then their quickness should win out.
mm,
Okay, and they did. What I will say is it might be a little bit of fool's gold for them because Caledonia, as I say, it's almost a guard free team. Take away Ramsey and Whelan if those two don't have it going, and and Cheshire's weakness tends to be not the physicality of the defense, but the quickness, dealing with quickness, and because that's when you commit fouls. So we'll see how it is going forward. But from Cheshire's perspective, this was just absolute godsend.
mm,
It was just the game that they wanted. From Caledonia's perspective, it's kind of probably on the plan C now.
mm,
I think you got to get back, of course. You got to get
mm,
back.
mm.
Glasgow,
Yeah.
you got to get back.
Uh, Timberlake, 37 points. The first player since Jay Sean Page to score 37 or
A
more
lot of stats in EJ.
twice in the, yeah, he did. Not as many as Demarius Bowles, by the way,
Oh,
but
oh, I remember
when I put
the,
that filter on, there was Demarius Bowles, Demarius Bowles,
yeah,
Demarius Bowles, Demarius Bowles.
yeah, that's because Vince just gave him the ball. Darius
Yeah,
Bowles, for
yeah.
people who don't know, was a 6'4" American with braids who played for Milton Keynes at a time where Milton Keynes was just full of, it was just Vince just recruited just like seven athletes
Yeah.
and threw in Mike New and Robert Youngblood to beat the
Mm,
crap out of anybody else.
yeah, yeah.
And Demarius Bowles was electric. I
Mm,
even looked him up after the season after because he wouldn't have been the type of guy that Fab normally signed, but he was that good. We did actually have a look at him.
mm,
I think he was in Lithuania earning more money than we could ever pay him at that
yeah,
point,
yeah.
off the back of his.
I can't see him living with Fab for too long.
No, I can't either. But you kick the tires on everything, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah,
when you look
yeah,
at
yeah.
that would be the year we won nothing when Mersey beat us,
Mm,
you know. So then you always think, how do we, you know, what have we got? But yeah, yeah, he was yeah, yeah, he was good.
mm.
He was a tough cover.
Austin 18, 6 rebounds and 6 assists. Planutis 13 points and 6 rebounds. Holden, by the way, 10 points, 8 assists, 5 steals. Uh,
Timberlake actually has a little bit of page about him as well.
mm,
Because he has that ability when he rises up, and you commented on the commentary when he has that double clutch on his
mm,
foul on his jump shot. He has that ability to get his shot off without anybody being able to challenge it, despite not appearing to be overly athletic.
mm,
You know, it's almost like a set shot from three.
mm,
But Jay was exactly the same. You know, he kind of glided around the court, but he could get his shot off against anybody, and you could never quite work out
mm.
how. You know, so yeah, it's a certain type of thing as a scorer.
And once or twice he doesn't run back when
And
he's.
once the place doesn't run back, yeah, well, as you will forever point out, yeah.
Ramsey 7 of 9 for 18 points. Spielman 15 on Wesson Whelan 11. It's good to bring that back up again. Let's
Absolutely.
go to Sunday. London Lions 80, Surrey 89 and 69. No Brisker for London. So Goodwin was in the starters. Lawrence is still out. Hunt was back. James from the line, Sholovinskas a three. Surrey out to a 9-16 lead, and they kind of maintained that for the whole of the first half.
Yeah, I mean, if you were to pick a player who London could do least without, it would be Aaron Rye.
Mm,
But if you went beyond that, it would be Brisker
mm,
because they've got, Brisker to Goodwin is a
mm,
substantial come down, and that's not a knock on Goodwin. He's a 19 or 20-year-old kid. You know, it's just a different level. You know, Brisker's a France Pro A professional. You know, and Brisker, and if there was a knock on London, you would say that the outside shooting can be spotty.
mm,
You know, Peterson's not a natural 3-point shooter. Holloway seems to be a capable shooter, but you wouldn't say he was a sniper. Um, Sandy the same. Rye mixes and matches, and then you're into the bigs, and Stokeman obviously can shoot the ball, but I'm not talking about the bigs. Really, I'm talking about the guards. So Briscoe's shiftiness in his shot making is a big miss for them, and that kind of piqued my interest in this game a little bit. Okay, maybe the death march might just subside a little bit. Obviously, they had Soko back, which gives them a ton of depth in the front court as well. And to start with, I think I understand why he started Goodwin, but I don't think he started the third quarter, which kind of gives you an idea that it's hard um, for for London to score the ball early. Surrey, very competent team. Don't win enough games probably, but a very competent team. The things that they do. Adelican struggled a little bit in this game. That really hurt them. They needed a little bit more out of him. Um, but Ray and James are they're guys who can score. And Josh Steele made a couple of plays early. And they competed, I think, better defensively than they probably have done against London in previous games, albeit all the games have been close.
mm. Oh, they've
Um,
won. They're 3-2 against London. Well, three
yeah,
and three now, but
3
three
and
and
3 now,
three
yeah.
two going this into this game. 2:30 into the second quarter. Delaire called for a third foul and then a technical for his fourth foul. He never came back into the game after that.
I thought he was very harsh done too. I thought there were some weird calls in this game as well, if I'm honest. I can't remember them all now, but that one really kind of stuck in my mind. I thought it was there was one, yeah, there was one where the ref blew someone out of bounds, and the replay showed that he wasn't out of bounds on the sideline.
Oh yeah, down in the corner. It
Down in the
was
corner, you watch the replay. Well, hang
yeah,
on,
yeah, yeah,
he wasn't out of bounds. How you
yeah,
play
yeah.
foul? And the guy, what? What? I'm sorry if you're standing there looking at the sideline and you can't see that he's not stood on it. Then what are you
Mm,
looking at? You wouldn't blow your whistle unless you saw him stand on it. And he clearly
mm,
didn't stand on it. So why
mm,
would you blow your whistle? Um, but I thought that I was really unlucky because there was a little bit of a bump early on that drive, but it was kind of I think was it James who was going into him,
mm,
and that wasn't called. And then he reaches down and he basically rips the ball out of his hands.
mm,
Legitimately, and it's a late call. And I'm not having this patient whistle nonsense on that. That was a late call, and his reaction was an honest reaction.
mm,
Yeah, his reaction was an honest reaction, which is, Ref, you got that wrong, and he gesticulated a bit. And I hate those ones. I hate that technical, whereby sadly a ref's made a mistake and then duplicated his mistake when a player makes a natural reaction. Now he may have gone on and said a bit more than he was meant to, but the technical was called pretty quick.
mm, mm,
And so that basically changes him from 2 to 4. And I thought, that was unfortunately a double mistake well, certainly a single mistake by the ref and then amplified by the technical. Um, it's a tough one because, we're all about consistency and sometimes people wave their arms and get them, sometimes people wave their arms and don't get them,
mm,
you
mm.
know. And it was interesting, Buzic didn't bring him back in the second half,
No, no.
even on 4 fouls. That was really, I mean, obviously he's got an abundance of riches because he's got Stuckman, he's got Hadžibegovic, he's got Ovi. So there's an argument, the fourth guy I really don't need anyway, if you've not got it going. But so Bozic wasn't being particular either. The inference was he's either not very happy with him or he just decided he didn't need him, which is fair
Mm,
enough either way.
mm,
So no, I thought London got a bit of a. There was another one I think at half court where they had at the end of the first quarter they had a layup taken away from them and two foul shots to Surrey. You see that?
Can't remember
And two
that
seconds,
one.
2 seconds to go in the first quarter. They're bringing the ball over half
Oh yeah, yeah. Was it Holloway was trying to
Holloway,
steal
and
the ball off Gooden?
yeah, he gets a steal off Gooden, and there's a late whistle from across the court.
Mm,
And the guy who's really the closest to that hasn't called anything at all with the
mm.
best look. So I thought they were a bit unfortunate with that as well. But look, refs are there. I'm just happy they're there.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
let's leave it at that.
Uh, there wasn't a ton going on in the third quarter, I didn't think. In the fourth quarter, Stuckman and Holloway threes pushed London 63-58 ahead. And
But look, I
then,
mean, Aaron Ryder said he wasn't going to lose this
yeah,
game.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's the bottom line in this game. Aaron Ryder made just about every play, and he was ticking the whole game.
Mm,
He's actually a bit petulant,
mm,
probably more than I've seen. I think he probably, you kind of got the impression that he understood the importance of that game more than just about everybody else.
yeah, yeah.
And he made every play that they needed to make.
He going back to your gesticulations, he had one or two that
Well, he
were
did. Well, he got thrown out at the end. Did you see
yeah,
that?
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I did, yeah,
he
yeah,
got
yeah.
thrown out. He got two at the end, and he was probably, as I say, he was probably lucky to get two. He probably could have had one earlier on anyway. But to be fair, he just was able to get to the rim at will, and he's got that slow down and the fall. He played in that kind of he played that type of game where he was saying we're not going to lose, and they got actually to be fair, they got really good minutes out of Matthew Goodwin in the second half.
Mm,
He didn't score the ball, didn't shoot the ball, but he didn't turn the ball over. And a couple of times they attacked him, he did okay. I mean, they gave up a couple of shots because they were trying to post him and that type of stuff. But I think Boza should be pretty happy with the fact that he was able to keep him on the court into the fourth quarter
mm,
in that game. But if Aaron Wright's not there, they don't win the game because Aaron
mm.
Wright offensively took over and London's defense took over. And then you get to four, you get to what, 2 minutes to go, you're up four. Jalen Ray misses a three and Alan Hadžibegovic makes one. There's
Yeah,
the
yeah. Dagger three, 2.5 minutes, 2:38 on the clock, 71-64.
Yeah, it's a dagger through because Ray misses one at the other end to reduce
Yeah,
it to a point, and
yeah,
Hadžibegovic makes one. And if you're Surrey, you're thinking I'll live with them odds.
yeah, yeah.
And Hadžibegovic made a few this year, but still, at the end of the game, he's the one who's stepping out there and
Well,
shooting
as Anya pointed out, he actually has better numbers from 3-point range than he does from the free throw
power
line this
line.
season.
Yeah,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
don't shoot that many, does he? And you're not going to run him off because he's going to take one dribble and dunk on you.
Mm, mm,
So the fact that he took it at that point to do it, um, yeah, London's size is really, really impactful in the SLB. Stuntman. under the glass. Peterson is a big guard. He gets his hands on stuff, he rebounds. Um, Sandy comes in and rebounds. Um, Begovic is probably the biggest centre in the league, certainly wingspan wise. He's certainly the biggest regularly playing centre in the league, probably taller than Thompson, probably a little bit more of a wingspan than Thompson, not as athletic. But he's the only one who comes close. And then you have Soko as well, who's barreling down there as well. So I thought their size and their rebounding and their defense eventually wore Surrey down. Uh, Cholovinskas was really good again.
Hmm.
Lloyd had him in at the end quite justifiably. But they need to get some scoring out of Adelkin to win games like that. Because they got a couple of layups out of Hunt, a couple of layups out of Adelkin, but they need more from the inside. It's a little bit like Newcastle struggled when Delpesh and Defoe don't score because it's very hard for guards and wings to score the ball to the degree to beat a team like London. You got to get 80.
Right, 20 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists. Hadzabegovic, 6 or 7 shooting, 15 points and 4 blocks. Peterson and Soko both had 13.
And I just mentioned all those big guys. Sorry, Dad. I just mentioned all those big guys, but Rye had 11 rebounds.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
He's
yeah,
not one of them.
yeah.
That's it. And he gets the ones which kind of drop and land. You know what I mean? And when he gets it, he can run the other way because he's good. He can penetrate. Yeah, really good.
James 15, Steele and Ray 11. They were 34% from the floor and 5 of 19 from 3, sorry.
Yeah, they got to make a few more shots. But that's the point about guards. You struggle to beat them. You've got to get some scoring inside if you can.
Bristol Flyers 68, Leicester Riders 67. This was one of those games where fans go home buzzing, even though it was a pretty terrible game.
I mean, I didn't want. I don't want to be. I don't really want to use a phrase to pay on Bristol's parade because the
Yeah,
first game they've won since January.
at
But
home.
truth at home, sorry,
Yeah,
but truth dictates that the way Leicester played the first three quarters, Bristol should have been up 20,
yeah,
and I mean, God knows what Stu was looking at, watching, thinking, there's a team
yeah,
that's,
yeah, yeah,
17 of 30 against us and they're 2 of 20 against
yeah,
Bristol, something like that. But I had to make a miss game to a certain degree, but Leicester were way off. I mean, Hunter was missing the bunnies. Um, Abercrombie just had one of those games, unfortunately, where he wasn't there. Um, and the physicality of the game, they weren't able to dominate. But Bristol were also like a team in need of an offensive identity at times. He always felt that Leicester would get better shots than Bristol, just Leicester couldn't knock him down. Bristol's decision making at times wasn't great either.
mm,
And that's why it was, like 10-10 after a quarter or something ridiculous.
yeah. So first game since the 15th of December for Ralph Thomas Edwards. He came in first play, offensive rebound, putback. That must have felt good to him.
Well,
Also,
here's the thing though. I mean, the other
yeah,
one, I was watching it the first 3 or 4 times they got the ball down low. And Leicester sent some sensible double teams. So they got Thompson there. And I'm just looking at the screen saying, will somebody cut?
mm,
I think if you remember the first couple of plays, there were turnovers that threw him out of bounds.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Threw it all. I'm thinking, will somebody cut to the rim, get some movement in the defense, and then you have an open kick out or maybe a cut on an open cut. And Walsh came out after 2.5 minutes, and Thomas Edwards came in the first possession. Thomas Edwards cut.
mm,
It's not a sexy play. It's not, it's not, but it's a play you need to make. And
yeah,
he made, and it gives you a whole different team. It gives your team a different look, a different force.
mm,
He has been a substantial miss for them.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so yeah,
The the other thing to pick up on, Leslie Smith started. It's his first start since the 17th of March 2023, so 2 years ago, and he only had one start in the last 5 years, 101 games, one start.
well, I was a bit perplexed by that. I mean, I know Lewis was hurt, wasn't he? Lewis got hurt last week. He didn't wasn't in the game at the end of last week, and so
Mm.
he had I don't know if it was a knock to
A
the head or
cut,
something like
wasn't
that.
it? Yeah.
Cut, yeah. So, but he didn't start, and so they started the Smith Robinson double act, as it were. Sounds like a good bunch of lawyers, doesn't it? Smith and Robinson. Um, and that's interesting because it plays kind of a little bit havoc with the rotations because it means that there's times in the game where neither of them was in the game.
Mm.
And most times this season, one of them's been in the game, because Smith's been spelling Robinson. Um, and it actually worked. It impacted Abercrombie, or maybe Abercrombie just missed shots. Maybe that might have been it. But having a bigger guy guard him, he never got into any sort of rhythm. They actually struggled with the line in the fourth quarter when Leicester went small and Jackson was playing the four. That was a
Mm.
big difference. But I thought, yeah, it was an intriguing. I mean, I'm guessing that Bristol have had more different starting fives than any team this season.
Yeah, probably.
Because they're just constant.
Well, maybe Caledonia.
Maybe Caledonia, yeah,
Yeah.
true. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, sorry about
Mm.
that. But I don't think it'd be that far off with Bristol,
No, probably not. Probably not.
given the amount of injuries and changes
Yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
and stuff that they've had. And Sherfield's now not there, and Tennyson was there earlier and all that type of stuff. So they were kind of looking for something that worked, and it just became an old-fashioned slugfest,
Mm.
basically.
Yeah.
And Shelton came in and gave them some good offense, made a three.
His first career three-pointer in
Jesus, yeah, I remember him
SLB
shooting.
BBL.
I'm surprised at that because I remember him shooting plenty at Newcastle. I don't know
Yeah,
what he
yeah.
was,
No,
but
he did. It's actually I looked it up. He was only like 0 of 7 or 8 or something.
yeah,
He
well,
wasn't
so, that's because
but it
every
was
time he
funny
shot one,
because there was a delay in the game earlier this season when Simon broke his leg and he was out
yes,
there shooting threes in the dead time sort of thing.
yeah,
And I said to Ro, he's going to shoot one. He did shoot one and he missed it. And
yeah.
then there was a delay in the game on Friday, obviously, and he's out there shooting threes again. I thought it was going up, and then he makes it. He makes
Well,
one today.
big
But to
shoot
be
threes.
fair, on in like when you watch him in the warm ups, he's got quite a decent
Well,
rhythm, hasn't
he made two 15-footers as well.
he? Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
so you can't say it's an absolute shock to him.
He had 7 in a 12-3 run to
Yeah,
16-21. That was midway through the second quarter,
yeah,
16-21.
yeah.
Flyers then with an 11-2 start to the third quarter. Riders missing
What
all
just sorry on
sorts of
that.
shots.
What happened at half time? Did they take 2 points off the board or
I
something?
don't know. There was a big discussion. I couldn't quite work out what it was all about.
I think they took 2 points off Bristol. I don't know what it was. I need to check. I haven't been through the live stats because it's the last game. But I thought I thought it was 32-29 at half time. Might be wrong. Only watched it once, and it was definitely 30-29 coming out of the half time.
Mm, mm,
So and there was a big discussion about it, and because Bristol made a shot on the buzzer, Keely Johnson made a shot on the buzzer.
mm,
But anyway, well, I'll check. We'll check on it and find out.
mm.
Yeah, and then Leicester's offensive struggles continued in the third quarter.
There was
Rob
one where
pulled.
Hunter just missed a layup
It's
underneath.
Mr.
It was
There,
like,
yeah, left
yeah,
hand there. It's
yeah.
literally pop in. And Rob pulled Hunter and maybe Abercrombie as well after about 3 or 4 minutes, which he never normally does. But up Thompson early as well, put Shelton in to try and get something.
Mm,
They really didn't get any rhythm at all. Washington missed open threes; they were all missing.
mm.
Wright made a couple, but that was about it.
Shelton actually made 6 in a row to cut it to 5, but Walsh and Louis with threes to end out the third quarter, 52-40.
Yeah, and 40 being the
Yeah,
key.
yeah, yeah.
The team 40. How
Yeah,
many did
bear in mind they had 30 after 8 minutes
Yeah,
on
yeah,
Friday.
exactly. 40. I mean, wow. And I do think there's a thing with we've talked about Leicester before about them wearing down a little bit.
Mm, mm,
They are running they're running 7 or 8 guys, 7 guys primarily, and they're playing meaningful games every week.
mm,
And that's different. That is a big difference. It's a big difference. Other teams playing with the same degree of depth of roster, but they're not playing meaningful games every week because they win one, lose one, they're going to be in the playoffs.
mm,
They're playing to win every week, and I do think they kind of done that. But what it did mean was resting those guys early means that he was able to come back with a depth lineup at the beginning of the fourth quarter,
mm,
and that depth lineup was Hunter, Wright, Johnson, Jackson at the four, and Thompson, and that was critical because
mm,
Jackson was able to get going when he was at the four spot,
mm,
which he hadn't really been able to do when he was at the three spot. And they'd been attacking Abercrombie off the dribble, and Johnson, committed a couple of fouls, and Abercrombie was struggling to stay on the switches with the Bristol guys. So by doing that kind of positional change, there's 3 or 4 minutes in the fourth quarter where Leslie Smith was guarding Zach Jackson, and I was thinking this is not going to go well.
mm.
I think Kendall Lewis came back in with about 5 minutes to go, but by that time Zach Jackson was off and going.
Yeah, so it was 55-42 with 9 minutes to go. Jackson had 17 points in a 24-8 spell. It looked like Leicester were going to steal it at that point because they went 63-66 up with 2.5 minutes to go.
Yeah, I mean Zach Jackson just made play after play. I think Bristol were a little bit, then Raf Thomas Edwards comes into Gordon, but he overplays him,
Mm,
because the only way you can guard Zach Jackson sensibly, you can't get right up into him because he's too good, he'll go past you, right? You can't be right off him because he'll take a dribble in and then shoot the step back, right? So you've got to have a guy who with long arms who doesn't have to be right up to him, but can still kind of trouble his shot with his length, but is also quick enough to move his feet. Now, that ended up being Kendall Lewis, and I think he was the only one on Bristol's team who had a chance, to be honest, at that point.
mm,
It's a very difficult skill. It's a very difficult guy to guard, Zach Jackson. It's interesting because Newcastle did it with Cole Long. Cole Long did it really well in the first games, but he didn't guard him on Friday because of the matchups. And when Zach Jackson had Aaron Aikens on him, he was able to score because he could shoot over him or force us to have him step back, and he couldn't contest the shot. So I thought the matchup going small really helped Leicester. You're basically playing with, and I thought Bristol were not smart in
mm.
relation to their attack. I mean, what did Charles have? 5 blocks?
7.
7. Oh, sorry, I'm not sorry,
Mm,
Charles. But they just kept. I mean, they just kept going at him. And then
yeah,
there was
yeah,
one. There
yeah.
was one in the first half where McCormack tries to pull a spin hook and a little lefty layup, and it's like, Owen, it's the middle of March. Have you not watched? Have you not seen this guy?
Yeah,
They're
yeah.
even with 45 seconds to go, that their players to throw the ball to Damon Robinson in the post
Mm,
against Thompson. Just what are you doing?
mm,
Well,
yeah.
and then there's a few more as well, whereby you just get out. But you have to get the ball. If you're going to get the ball down there, you've got to kick it out.
Mm,
You got to be smart. You got to do 2 foot jump stops. You got to find the open guy. You just take 2 dribbles and 2 steps and think you got a layup. He's going to block it, and he did.
mm,
He's
mm,
immense.
yeah. 65-66, both teams missing in the last couple of minutes. Leicester had a shot clock violation with 46 seconds to go. Johnson missed a three. Hunter got a rebound and was fouled. And 20.3 seconds to go, he goes to the line, misses the first, makes the second. So Leicester are up 65 67.
He was a bit subdued in this game, Hunter, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was, yeah.
No, I'm not talking about subduing the way he plays. Just as he seemed to be fighting with himself a little bit. He seemed to be in his own head a little bit. The one thing about him all season has been that he has been kind of the head of the snake. He's been the emotional. There's been a level of emotional connection, a level of we ain't losing type of mentality
Mm,
about him. He's made big shots at big times, never backed away from anybody, never backed down. In this game, I just thought I don't know, maybe again it's March, maybe it's just a little bit. He just, he doesn't miss layups like that.
mm,
He's one of those guys that, if I had Fab behind us, he'd be saying, he's something wrong with him. He's got,
mm,
somebody's not well or something like that. His mind just didn't seem to be where it was. But he's a rookie, he's going to have games like that, I suppose. Um, so yeah, even to the fact that he missed a foul shot, I don't think he's missed many foul shots in crunch time this year. He's been a really good crunch time player. And then finally, Dan, well, there's actually a little quirk, wasn't there, because they let the ball roll.
yeah, yeah. They let the ball roll, and then for some reason the clock ticked.
Yeah, and
And
so the ref, to be fair, made the right call. He had to
yeah,
stop the game because the clock had ticked 7/10. So yeah, so again, but what that meant was Bristol got to run something from the sideline
yeah,
instead of running it full court. Now, teams would generally have more kind of go-to short game situation plays from the sideline than they have from the full court. That said, obviously it's Bristol, so you got to get the ball in.
yeah,
Uh, sorry, guys. It's 2 years ago. You ain't ever going to
mm,
forget. And they were able to do that. But finally, they ran a pick and pop whereby Robinson faded to the 3-point line when Thompson went in to block the shot. And finally, they threw the ball out to a guy who was a shooter at the 3-point line.
mm,
And for me, I'd have had Robinson stuck on the 3-point line the whole second half with Thompson guarding him because he can shoot the three. If he instead of being on the baseline and going for offensive rebounds, he needs to be in the corner, keep Thompson out of the way. If Thompson comes in, you kick it out and you live with Damon Robinson making numbers and threes.
mm,
And finally, they did it, and they got an open. They got the most open look they've had in the game. Even though Jackson came from the corner, made a hell of a play to contest the shot. Because that wasn't his contest. He was guarding the corner. He comes up to contest the shot, but they finally took Thompson out of it. by way of basically kicking it out
Mm.
around the screen, kicking it out. And that's where, of course, Hunter's missed foul shot is so crucial.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the
Because
difference between defending a two and defending a three is everything.
mm,
So Todd Johnson, Thompson is going back to block Keely Johnson's shot because he knows a two ties the game.
mm,
Whereas if it was a three, he wouldn't be contesting that. He'd be staying closer to Robinson and
mm,
maybe Bristol get a two, and that's it. So yeah, I mean, eventually they got it. Eventually they got it. And to be fair, Robinson, he knocked the shot down,
yeah,
but
yeah.
he can shoot that shot. Robinson, if he gets the ball off good passes, he's a good shooter.
Mm,
It's when he has to think about it, stands around at the top, whatever. When he's not quite in rhythm, he's a rhythm guy. If he's in rhythm, he'll knock it down. And then
Jackson
we
missed a
got
fadeaway basically on the buzzer.
Bristol got the defense right again this time. If you go back and watch his play, it's really interesting the way they defended it because Walsh doesn't pressure the ball. He stands to the baseline side of the pass. And what he basically does is he is denying um, Hunter, who cuts through to the post on the baseline and ends up in the corner. So Walsh isn't letting the pass go in there, and he isn't close enough whereby he's getting back up by a guy who puts the ball in bounds. What that means is Leicester are left with a high screening role for Thompson and Jackson handling the ball, with their three guards on the outside, the three shooters, Hunter in the corner, Wright or Johnson, whoever put the ball in on the where they put the ball in, and Wright or Johnson on the other corner. So it's basically a standard 4 out 1 in screen and roll for Jackson. But Bristol have got Lewis matched up on him. And Lewis does a good job of staying in front of him and then forcing him to kind of turn and spin and shoot the really tough fadeaway. It's a makeable shot, but it's a really tough shot. And at that point, when Jackson penetrates, because there's only 4 or 5 seconds left on the clock, the Leicester guys from the corners all crash.
Mm,
So there's nobody out there at the last minute. If Jackson didn't like that shot, he doesn't have Hunter stood in the far corner open for the kick out. He doesn't have Wright stood in the other corner open for the kick out because they're all crashing the glass.
mm,
They think that they know that shot's going up. And I think that actually hurt them because of the way that Lewis played D and the way Bristol played. I think if one of them had stayed out, I think they might have had an open 3 point shot. I get why they didn't because it's
mm.
4 seconds and you're not going to do that. So
They'd
anyway,
have probably missed it the way they shot.
yeah, well, there's probably Hunter probably wasn't looking for it actually. To be fair, yeah. But and then what happens? The ball happens. Fortunately for Bristol, it goes out of Thompson's area airspace,
Mm,
and someone gets a hand on it and tips it away, and that's the game.
mm,
Um, you got the impression of a fairly weary game, didn't you?
mm.
Really,
Yeah, yeah,
outside of Shelton's energy
yeah.
and Jackson in the fourth quarter, it really was a fairly weary game, both from a physical and a mental standpoint. The fact that Leicester came close is because Jackson wouldn't let them go.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, that you have to think that they're still they don't. That's the problem. The difficulty for Leicester is they didn't get a game out of Hunter. They didn't get a game out of Abercrombie, and it's just a lot to ask all those other guys.
Mm,
If two of those guys aren't quite where they need to be, they don't have the wriggle room that the other teams have. The
mm,
other top teams have to plug somebody else in there.
mm.
So yeah, now they're probably done for the league now. You don't see
Yeah,
London
dropping three.
and Sheffield dropping three at
Two.
least.
Yeah, yeah, three. Sorry, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You mentioned first time wins since January. Johnson, Robinson, Walsh, Thomas Edwards, and Lewis all had 10 or 11 points. Jackson, 24 and 10, 17 of them in the fourth quarter. Shelton, 12. Thompson with 7 blocks, which is the most since Leslie Smith in December 2023. And as I mentioned, Damaris Bowles, Kyler Kelly, Kyler Kelly, Kyler,
Kelly,
Kyler
Kelly,
Kelly.
Kelly. Kelly was playing in the NBA
Yeah,
this
yeah,
year.
yeah.
He signed for the Mavericks, I think. So yeah, Vince knows how to pick him.
Mm,
Yeah,
mm. They were combined 49 of 139 from the floor, the two teams. Yeah, yeah. Well,
240.
let's have a look at the league table. We now have 3 qualifiers for the playoffs. Leicester have a queue now as well. London are 20-4, Sheffield are 16-5, Leicester are 15-7, Newcastle 10-12, Cheshire 10-14, Manchester 9-13, Bristol 7-12, Surrey 7-13, and Caledonia 4-18.
Still 10 games, so Caledonia's margins are dropping now.
Yeah, they are. Yeah,
Um, everything else is kind of what it is, such as the nature of the playoffs that none of Manchester, Cheshire, or Newcastle will really be bothered about which team they end up playing.
no,
Because in a two-legged home and home, in the parity that we've got, I think those teams will think that they can beat any of the top three, realistically.
mm,
If it was a best of three, I think it'd be a little bit different. So this is where the playoff kind of format is doesn't really reward the top teams as much as it should. Um, but they should, the playoffs might be good if we've got any players, teams, and
yeah,
rest by the time we get there.
yeah, yeah. So we reached the
Yeah,
end. Well, hopefully be in a better mood next week. We never know. Maybe a bit.
yeah. Well, to be
Maybe
fair, we
something
haven't got
will
many weeks
fill
to
the
go, have we?
bucket a little bit this week. Who knows?
Yeah, we haven't got many weeks to go anyway.
No.
Just please sort it out.
Yeah.
There needs to be at the end of the day, Sheffield need to start playing basketball again.
Yeah.
I don't care. And to be frank, I don't care whose ego gets hurt.
Mm,
Just get them playing basketball again into a proper league running. Let's have some proper games between Sheffield and London, Sheffield and Leicester and London. So we see these meaningful games played out with trophies on the line.
yeah.
Just get it going because that's what it's about. It's about watching the games, getting fans in the stand, and just putting to bed all the grievances and the upset and the anger and all that stuff, and just play the bloody game.
No, that's we end on that.
Yeah.
On that note, play the bloody games. We'll be back next week. Have a great week, everybody. Goodbye.